The mop glided across the floor, whispering secrets nobody bothered to hear. For 20 years, Samuel Carter had been invisible, just a shadow in a navy blue uniform, scrubbing away the stains of privilege in a company that never saw him. He pushed the bucket forward, the wheels squeaking faintly under the fluorescent lights of Pinnacle Enterprises' executive floor. It was 2 a.m., the hour when the building exhaled its secret's empty coffee cups, crumpled memos, and the faint musk of ambition. Samuel, 58, with gray threading his tight curls, moved with the rhythm of a man who knew every corner of this place. The mahogany desks, the glass walls, the framed awards boasting diversity and inclusion, he'd polished them all. Tonight, though, his hands trembled slightly, not from fatigue but from the weight of a truth he'd carried for decades. 20 years ago, Samuel wasn't just a janitor. He'd been a dreamer, a man with a vision sharper than the suits who now ignored him. Fresh out of college, he'd co-founded Pinnacle with two partners, Richard Hale and Evelyn Marsh. They were young, hungry, and naive, believing talent could trump prejudice. Samuel brought the idea's blueprints for software that would revolutionize data analytics. Richard brought the charm, Evelyn the connections. They agreed, equal shares, equal dreams. But the world wasn't equal. Clients balked at a black man leading pitches. Investors whispered about marketability. So, Samuel stepped back, letting Richard take the spotlight while he worked in the shadows, coding late nights, building the company's foundation. The deal was simple. He'd stay silent, keep his ownership quiet, and let Pinnacle grow. In return, he'd have his stake, 33% of a dream. But dreams rot when buried. Richard and Evelyn climbed, their faces plastered on Forbes covers, while Samuel was handed a mop. "It's temporary," they'd said. Temporary became 20 years. 20 years of overhearing boardroom deals through closed doors, of watching interns younger than his son rise to VP. 20 years of being called boy by men he'd outsmarted decades ago. He stayed because he believed in the company he'd built, because his shares still legally his were his legacy for his daughter, Maya, now 25 and chasing her own dreams in law school. Tonight, though, the air felt different, heavy, electric. Pinnacle was on the verge of a $2 billion acquisition, a deal that would cement Richard and Evelyn as legends. Samuel had seen the contracts left carelessly on desks, the ones that conveniently omitted his name. He'd heard Richard's voice through the boardroom door last week, laughing, "Samuel? He's just the help." Evelyn's silence had cut deeper than the words. They thought he was nothing. They thought wrong. Samuel paused by the glass wall of the boardroom, catching his reflection. His face was lined, not just with age but with the weight of being unseen. He set the mop against the wall and pulled a folded document from his pocket, his original shareholder agreement, yellowed but intact. Tomorrow, the board would meet to finalize the acquisition. Tomorrow, Samuel Carter would stop being invisible. The next morning, the boardroom buzzed with anticipation. Richard, 60, silver-haired and sharp in a tailored suit, stood at the head of the table, his voice booming with confidence. "This deal is our legacy," he said, gesturing to the executives around him, mostly white, mostly male, all nodding like disciples. Evelyn, 59, sat to his right, her poised smile masking the steel in her eyes. She'd always been the strategist, the one who smoothed over Richard's ego while securing their power. The room smelled of fresh coffee and ambition, the city skyline gleaming through the windows. Samuel entered, unnoticed at first, pushing his cleaning cart. Heads turned, then dismissed him. Just the janitor. He moved to the corner, wiping down a side table, his heart pounding. The document was in his back pocket, its weight like a loaded gun. He'd planned this for weeks, rehearsing the words, imagining their faces. But now, standing here, the rage he'd buried for 20 years clawed at his chest. He wasn't just exposing them, was reclaiming himself. "Excuse me," Samuel said, his voice low but steady, cutting through Richard's monologue. The room froze, Richard's brow furrowed, irritation flashing. "We're in a meeting, Sam. Can it wait?" "No," Samuel said, stepping forward. "It can't." He pulled the document from his pocket and placed it on the table, the paper landing with a soft thud that echoed like a gavel. "This is my shareholder agreement, dated 2005, signed by you, Richard, and you, Evelyn. It says I own 33% of Pinnacle Enterprises." The room went silent, the kind of silence that swallows sound. Richard's mouth opened, then closed. Evelyn's smile vanished, her eyes narrowing. The other executives exchanged glances, confusion rippling through the air. Samuel stood taller, his voice gaining strength. "For 20 years, I've cleaned your offices, mopped your floors, and listened to you take credit for my work. I built the software that made this company. I stayed quiet because I believed in us. But you betrayed me." Richard laughed, a sharp, nervous bark. "This is absurd. You're a janitor, Sam. You expect us to believe you're what, a secret tycoon?" The executives chuckled, but it was uneasy, their eyes darting to the document. Evelyn leaned forward, her voice cold. "Samuel, if this is some kind of stunt, it's in poor taste. You've been a loyal employee, but this is a serious meeting." "Loyal?" Samuel's voice cracked, not with weakness but with fury. "I was your partner. I wrote the code that won our first contract. I stayed in the shadows because you said it was best for the company. But you lied. You erased me." The room shifted. Doubt crept into the executives' faces. One reached for the document, scanning it. "This looks real," he muttered, passing it to another. Richard's face reddened, his hands gripping the table. "This is nonsense. He's delusional. He's—" "Then call my lawyer," Samuel interrupted, his voice like steel. "Or better yet, check the company's original filings. My name's there. Hidden, but there." He turned to the room, his eyes burning. "I've watched you all profit off my work while I cleaned your spills. Today that ends." Evelyn stood, her composure cracking. "Samuel, let's discuss this privately. You're making a scene." "No," he said, stepping closer. "You don't get to control this anymore. You thought I was nothing, but I own this company as much as you do. And I'm done being invisible." The boardroom erupted. Executives whispered, some pulling out phones, others staring at Richard and Evelyn, whose faces betrayed their guilt. Richard slammed his fist on the table. "You think you can waltz in here and ruin everything? You're nobody." Samuel didn't flinch. "I'm the man who built this, and I'm the man who'll decide its future." The acquisition meeting spiraled into chaos. Lawyers were called, documents demanded. Samuel stood his ground, his heart racing but his resolve unbreakable. He thought of Maya, of the nights he'd told her to fight for her place in a world that tried to erase her. This was his fight, not just for his shares but for every time he'd been dismissed, overlooked, reduced to a stereotype. As the hours passed, the truth unraveled. The original filings confirmed Samuel's stake. Richard's bluster faded, replaced by panic. Evelyn's calculated calm crumbled, her eyes avoiding Samuel's. The executives, once loyal to the CEO, now questioned everything. Samuel's story wasn't just a revelation, it was a reckoning. By evening, the boardroom was a battlefield of egos and exposed lies. Samuel sat at the table, no longer the janitor but the man who held Pinnacle's fate. He looked at Richard and Evelyn, their faces pale, and felt no triumph, only clarity. "I didn't do this for revenge," he said, his voice softer now. "I did it for the truth, for my daughter, for every person you've stepped on to get here." The acquisition was paused, pending a full investigation. Samuel walked out of the boardroom, the mop left behind, his steps lighter than they'd been in years. He wasn't just reclaiming his stake, he was rewriting his story, and the world would finally see him. The city lights glittered beyond the boardroom windows, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside Pinnacle Enterprises. Samuel Carter, no longer just the janitor, stood at the center of a maelstrom he'd unleashed. His shareholder agreement lay on the table like a grenade with the pin pulled, and the executives around him were scrambling to contain the blast. Richard Hale, the silver-haired CEO, paced like a caged animal, his face a mask of fury and fear. Evelyn Marsh, the strategist who'd always seemed untouchable, sat rigid, her fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the table. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made your skin prickle. Samuel's revelation had shattered the room's carefully curated order. For 20 years, he'd been the invisible man, mopping floors while Richard and Evelyn reaped the rewards of his genius. Now, the truth was out. Samuel owned 33% of Pinnacle, a stake worth hundreds of millions in the pending $2 billion acquisition. The executives, once dismissive, now leaned forward, their eyes darting between Samuel and the document that proved his claim. Whispers filled the room, legal terms, accusations, and the occasional gasp as the reality sank in. Richard stopped pacing and pointed a trembling finger at Samuel. "You think you can just walk in here and rewrite history? This company is mine. I built it." His voice cracked, betraying the desperation beneath his bravado. Samuel met his gaze, unflinching. "You built it on my code, my ideas, my sacrifice." His voice was calm, but each word landed like a blow. "You told me to stay in the shadows for the good of the company. I trusted you, and you turned me into a ghost." Evelyn cleared her throat, her voice measured but strained. "Samuel, we appreciate your contributions, but this is a complex situation. Let's not make rash decisions that could jeopardize the acquisition." Her eyes flicked to the executives, gauging their reactions. She was trying to regain control, to spin the narrative back in her favor. "Contributions." Samuel's laugh was bitter, raw. "I was your partner, Evelyn. Not an employee, not a charity case. A partner." He turned to the room, addressing the board. "They asked me to hide because clients wouldn't trust a black man leading the pitch. They said it was temporary. 20 years later, I'm still cleaning their offices while they cash out my work." The room shifted again. A younger executive, a woman named Claire with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness, spoke up. "If this agreement is legitimate, and it looks like it, then Samuel's entitled to his share. We need to verify the filings, but this changes everything." Her voice was steady, but her glance at Richard and Evelyn was laced with suspicion. Richard's face flushed. "This is a setup. He's been planning this, waiting to sabotage us." He turned to the board, his charm slipping. "You can't seriously believe this janitor over me?" "His name is Samuel Carter," Claire snapped, her voice cutting through the room. "And he's not just a janitor. He's a founder." The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. "Founder." The executives murmured, some nodding, others pulling out laptops to dig into the company's archives. Samuel felt a flicker of hope, but he didn't let it show. He'd learned long ago not to trust fleeting allies. Instead, he thought of Maya, his daughter, whose law school tuition he'd paid with late-night shifts and quiet dreams. This wasn't just about him, it was about her future, about proving the world couldn't erase them. The board called for an emergency recess, demanding access to Pinnacle's original filings. Lawyers were summoned, their briefcases snapping open like gunfire. Samuel stayed in the boardroom, refusing to leave. He sat at the table, his hands folded, the weight of 20 years pressing on his shoulders. Richard and Evelyn huddled in a corner, their whispers frantic. Samuel caught fragments: damage control, settlement, publicity nightmare. They still thought they could bury him. As the hours dragged on, the truth emerged like a body rising from a lake. The company's founding documents, buried in a digital vault, listed Samuel Carter as a co-founder with a 33% stake. The lawyers confirmed it. His shares were intact, untouched by the maneuvers Richard and Evelyn had used to sideline him. The acquisition couldn't proceed without his approval. Samuel wasn't just a stakeholder, was the key. Richard's bravado crumbled. He approached Samuel, his voice low, almost pleading. "Sam, let's be reasonable. We can work this out. You don't want to tank the deal, do you? Think of the employees, the investors." Samuel looked at him, seeing the man he'd once called a friend. "You didn't think of me," he said quietly. "Not once in 20 years. Why should I save you now?" Evelyn joined them, her face pale but composed. "Samuel, we made mistakes.
I'm sorry.
But if you push this, the company could collapse. Is that what you want?" Samuel studied her, the woman who'd once shared his dreams. "I wanted respect," he said. "I wanted my place. You took that from me. Now you're scared because I'm taking it back." The board reconvened, the atmosphere electric. Claire took the lead, her voice commanding. "Mr. Carter's ownership is undisputed. The question is what happens next. The acquisition requires his consent, and we need to address the oversights of the past." "Oversights," Samuel interjected, his voice rising. "You call 20 years of erasure an oversight? I was denied my voice, my legacy, because of the color of my skin. This isn't a clerical error, it's a betrayal." The room fell silent. Even Richard looked away, unable to meet Samuel's gaze. Claire nodded, her expression solemn. "You're right, Mr. Carter. This is bigger than the acquisition. We need to make this right." The debate raged for hours. Some executives pushed for a quick settlement cash to make Samuel go away. Others, led by Claire, argued for transparency, for acknowledging Samuel's role publicly. Richard and Evelyn fought to salvage their reputations, but their arguments rang hollow. The board was fracturing, and Samuel was the fault line. Finally, Samuel stood, his presence commanding the room. "I'm not here to destroy Pinnacle," he said. "I built this company and I believe in it. But I won't be silenced anymore. I want my seat at this table not as a janitor, not as a token, but as a founder. I want the world to know the truth, and I want my shares honored in the acquisition." The board agreed to pause the acquisition for a full audit, with Samuel's role at the forefront. Richard and Evelyn were sidelined, their leadership under review. The news leaked by morning, and the headlines exploded. Janitor revealed as secret owner of tech giant. Social media erupted, some calling Samuel a hero, others accusing him of deceit. The world was watching, and Samuel was no longer invisible. In the days that followed, Samuel walked through Pinnacle's halls differently. Employees stared, some with awe, others with guilt. He met with Claire and a new legal team, mapping out his future. He called Maya, hearing her sob with pride over the phone. "You did it, Dad," she said. "You showed them." But the victory was bittersweet. Samuel thought of the years lost, the nights he'd doubted himself, the times he'd swallowed his pride to keep going. He thought of every person who'd been overlooked, dismissed, erased because they didn't fit the mold. His fight wasn't just for him, it was for them. A week later, Samuel stood before a press conference, the cameras flashing like stars. He wore a suit, not a uniform, but his hands were still calloused from years of work. "I'm Samuel Carter," he said, his voice steady. "I co-founded Pinnacle Enterprises. For 20 years, I cleaned its offices while others took credit for my work. I stayed because I believed in what we built. Today, I'm here to claim my place not just for me, but for everyone who's been told they don't belong." The crowd murmured, some cheering, others whispering. Samuel continued, his words raw and real. "This isn't about revenge. It's about truth. It's about a world where your worth isn't measured by your skin or your title, but by what you build. I hope Pinnacle can be that world." The acquisition moved forward, but with Samuel at the table. He negotiated his share, securing a legacy for Maya and a foundation to support underrepresented entrepreneurs. Richard and Evelyn stepped down, their reputations tarnished but their wealth intact. Samuel didn't hate them, pitied them, trapped by their own prejudice. Months later, Samuel walked into Pinnacle's new headquarters, a building he'd helped design. His name was on the wall, not as a janitor but as a founder. He still visited the old office sometimes, not to clean but to remember. The mop was gone, but the lessons remained. His story spread, sparking debates on race, equity, and justice. Some saw Samuel as a symbol of resilience. Others saw a challenge to the system. The question lingered. Was his fight a victory for one man or a wake-up call for a society? What do you think? Is justice served when the truth comes out, or does it only matter if the world changes with it?